depends on the film, like how quickly. There's a lot of them that take the entire film, obviously, to watch, and we try to, well, we're not like just skipping through everything. I mean, we're watching films closely, but there's some stuff that you just know is not going to work because, let's say, it's played, I don't know, 10 festivals, and we need premieres, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm sure it's great, but it's already shown in Ojai or whatever. It's already shown in the area. We don't want to be redundant, we want to try to choose new stuff. So sometimes we can rule out a film just because it's just not going to work, it's had too much exposure. Or maybe, and there are quality issues. I think that at a certain point, like there's a competency to, maybe a little more lenient on a documentary if the story is really fantastic, because sometimes, like, you have your cell phone and you get this great shot or whatever, you have limited access to high-end production gear when you're in the field. So sometimes maybe that production value wouldn't matter as much for a documentary, but for like a fiction film, if there's issues with sound right away, and you're watching these things on headphones generally, so it's like you can hear a lot of that. So if there's red flags in terms of just like competency, then we're not going to watch it all the way through probably. But if it's something that like is a premiere or has had limited festival exposure and like production value is good, story seems compelling, yeah, you'll watch it all the way through. But sometimes, yeah, you can know. The biggest red flag is, of course, just like production quality. And sometimes that's a dead giveaway if it's like this is an amateur film and it's just not up to the standards. But otherwise, yeah, we're pretty careful on trying to at least give it the benefit of the doubt.
We have one more question, maybe? Oh, in the back, yeah.
Do you ever feel a tension between Sundance, considering how close it is with you guys? How you maintain your voice versus what they're up to?
Good question. Great question.
Yeah, really good.
If you want to, I'll jump in.
Yeah. It actually, in a way, it's kind of a blessing, and because our deadline ends after they've announced and pretty much made their choices. So we get flooded towards the end of our deadline with a lot of independent films.
And docs too. A lot of big, strong submissions.
All the strong stuff really comes in at the end from that because it's overflow. But what's tough about it is that's another 300 films we have to watch, and we only have about 10 days to watch them all in. So that's the struggle, but it has been a nice thing. But once again, that's what everybody's waiting for, so we have to wait until the last minute to get those submissions.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, I don't know the exact stats this year, but I think it's around 12,000 submissions that Sundance gets. So, we get 3,500, which to me is like an impossible task. They have 12,000, or 13 maybe. I don't know, it's a lot. So, but again, they take the same number of films we do, more or less. So there's a lot of great films, surely, that are submitted within 13,000 that Sundance didn't take. And so they're looking for either Santa Barbara, South by Southwest, Tribeca. Those are the three festivals that we start to really compete with in December. So in the fall, we're competing with like Palm Springs, and we're competing with AFI, and we're competing with some of the festivals in California that are also pretty high profile. Once we went later into December and January, it's all about South by Southwest, Tribeca, and there's a few others, I guess, too. But it's blessing in disguise. I think that it kind of hurts we want to try to create a market, not necessarily market, but we want to have acquisitions and films getting bought here and having world premieres and press covering them, getting reviewed. That makes it difficult with Sundance. That said, we're moving to sort of more like a lot of the Hollywood Reporter this year has requested online links. So they might not be in Santa Barbara, and like a Today scenario too, if they had a press come up to watch films, well, it's nice to have a link we can send them to in case they can't make it to the actual screening. They can still get coverage, the film can still get reviewed, etc. But I think next year, we'll see how our dates shift, but it's possible that we'll be going right up against Sundance, which is not something that I'm particularly excited about.
You might move it up a little bit?
I don't know how it's going to work, but it's because the Oscars have also changed their dates. Yeah, so it's right now it's kind of a point of discussion, but at the same, so it's kind of the elephant in the room in a way. But again, Sundance, they're a good festival. They're the most famous festival for a lot of different reasons in the United States, at least. But they don't always. I think our programming is in some ways just as good. It's just that it's different. We have a different dimension, we have a different set of goals. They always have a lot of really big, important documentaries that they always debut that generally end up getting nominated the following year. There's always a handful of really premier, like auteur titles, from really big directors that always go there. So they're always going to, I think, have that, But at the same time, as far as a quality film, like a world premiere, I think we have really great stuff too. And so do the other festivals throughout the United States. So Sundance is not your only option. If you don't get in, and again, chances are actually pretty slim, and especially, I've looked at the stats, and almost everything that gets into Sundance has like a rep, a really, really influential publicist, a really influential sales agency, a really influential somebody behind it. So they might think, oh yeah, all these unknown directors, all these new talent, these people have a lot of power behind them, they have a lot of influence behind them, and if you're just like a, you know, Joe Schmo submitting, it's pretty rare to get accepted at Sundance. There still is a very dynamic and an interesting power structure behind all those first-time filmmakers. So.
All right, well, we have to go over to the Libero